which incest do you guys like better? Because you got kind of the creepy, their family has a history of incest of the dragons, and then you have... You know what's going to be amazing is I know this stuff well. Like, I know who everyone is, and I will lose names very quickly.
Wait.
Like Viserys.
What other incest are you talking about?
So...
Are you just talking about the history of Targaryen incest?
Yeah, but I mean, they don't do anything incestuous, but he's, like, touching her... And clearly, there's an incestuous undertone of domineering.
Anyone who says that's their favorite one is also, like, their favorite summer reading is, like, 50 Shades. Because that's not good. The Lannister stuff, there's a semblance of caring at this point that
there is.
That is more appealing than your brother telling you he'll let all of the horses fuck you because...
He
wants a crown.
And all their horses fuck you if they're meant to get the 7 kingdoms. He doesn't sound like that at all.
Yeah, I was like that.
That was
he just sounded way cooler than he actually does.
Robert Baratheon.
Like, maybe he had a point.
He squeals like, ah!
He's like a poor man's, what's Loki's name? Shoot, Tom Hiddleston.
Oh, yeah, he is.
He looks like a lizard.
He also kind of looks like Xenophilius Lovegood, who also plays the lizard in Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh, man.
What's that guy's name?
The world is small.
Oh, he's also in that good Notting Hill.
Rafe?
Rafe?
Rafe Iffins or something.
Yeah.
That.
I think I thought it was Ifins, but...
Ifins, whatever.
Who cares? The Brits.
Yeah. He's in Notting Hill. He's the best part of Notting Hill.
He is. You don't like Notting Hill?
I do like Notting Hill.
Oh, okay.
I think he's really good at Notting Hill.
He just... I agree. Like,
what the fuck?
I agreed with your statement. It was just the way you said it. You were like... He's the best part of Notting Hill, like, the rest of his poop.
Winter is coming.
Where are my dragons?
In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die.
The things I do for love.
A Lannister always pays his debts.
Chaos is a ladder.
Hodor.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We
are the Rewatchers on the wall.
Yeah. Cool. Should we just start? I don't know.
Let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to
summarize?
Or I can summarize. I'll summarize.
You should probably summarize. I need to be, if I'm going to be the summarizer on.
I think I want someone. I think it'd be better if someone who hasn't seen it summarizes.
Okay. Yeah. I'll start writing summaries.
Yeah.
But for now, I'll just improvise.
Just do key developments. Yeah.
Okay. So welcome to Game of Thrones, the show, the podcast
2.0.
This week,
let's
you.
Let's have the entire 6-minute intro.
I mean, I've only watched 4 episodes so far. The theme song, I wanted more. I wanted something more iconic.
But the animation that's with it is pretty freaking dope.
It's good.
Dude, have you heard the sad cello song yet?
I don't know.
The sad cello song gets me, man. It cuts me to my very center.
It sings my soul.
So we watched the first 4 episodes of Game of Thrones, and I'm about to summarize it in under 1 minute. Do you have your stopwatch ready?
And go.
Someone's coming to dinner at the Starks. Oh, it's the king. And boy, do they have dinner. And he's going to ask Ned Stark to be his right-hand man. In fact, the only hand man, the hand of the king himself. Hey. And Bran, that little monkey boy, sees a brother and sister banging each other's brains out. And then they try to bang his brains out by throwing him out the top of a tower. Whoops, didn't work, but he is in a coma. Then someone tries to kill him, but his mom is there to stop him. Meanwhile, across the sea, Daenerys is sold into prostitution by her brother, who says that he'll let anyone have sex with her as long as he gets what he wants, because he's a dick.
Sounds like my brother.
And then, next up, the Starks go on a road trip to King's Landing, where they're going to live now. Well, at least Sansa and Ned and Arya. And Jon Snow goes to the Wall, where he participates in hazing and then threatens a man.
You're killing it right
now. And then Ned Stark reads a boring book and discovers that the king has a bastard, just like him. They're closer than ever.
Is that in the first 4 episodes?
Yeah.
That happens? Wow.
Yeah, that just recently happened. And then
Gendry.
and then a very enthusiastic Italian man begins to teach Arya how to fight.
You're a water demon.
Oh, also Joffrey's a dick. I skipped that entire thing, but if people don't know, I mean, I knew that before I was reading.
Look
the
at
book,
his
I feel like.
face.
Yeah.
He's
He's got one of those faces
Should have sacrificed him.
that
to
you could
the-
curb stomp.
Wasn't he in the Narrows? What's the name of that place in Batman Begins?
Yes,
he was.
the
Yeah.
little
He's that
kid
little
Batman
boy.
Gets saved. That Batman
just
gets
looks
saved.
like a little.
Yeah.
He's like Malfoy, little demon blonde.
Oh yeah. Also, okay, yeah. So he gets attacked by Arya because he's a little idiot, and they kill.
The ginger.
Yeah, they kill the
And
butcher's
lady.
boy and lady.
Our first werewolf death.
Yeah, I mean not werewolf. Let's
Did
not
I
get
say
into
werewolf?
that.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, we just recorded our Twilight podcast. And then also Daenerys is becoming a badass.
Yeah, she put
Basically.
her douche brother in his place, and she's like, I'm the motherfucking Khaleesi now.
Oh yeah, she whips him with her belt.
Yeah.
With his belt, his own belt.
Because he's
Something.
always calling himself like, or his bad side, his Jekyll.
Is
that the
he
bad?
really?
He's calling it. No. He's calling it his the dragon.
Oh right,
Don't
okay.
wake the dragon.
I thought you were saying that.
And part of
that
me is
in
like,
some way, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde existed in Westeros.
Oh, you will see. No, he, yeah. For the dragon is clearly his anger, but I'm also like, please don't let this be your penis. We already have one incestuous couple. Oh. There are too many rapey undertones. And by the way, so far in these first episodes, there's been a lot of sex exclusively doggy style. Snoop Dogg would be proud.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you know this.
There's a key storyline of
According-
Of not doggy style.
Yeah, you're right. But seriously, the first episode, you see like 4 different couples have sex, and it's pretty much all doggy style.
Yeah. Well, it's the best sex.
Well, according to Watch
I wouldn't
according to Watch Mojo list, the top 10 sexual positions, number 1 is doggy style.
Oh my god.
And that's how you know that list was made by men.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could have lived without knowing that Watch Mojo had made such a list. I'm sure they have a whole channel that is sex and
Objectification based.
and health or something. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, so that's what happened in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
All those things.
Yeah.
There's action.
That was a good summary.
packed.
I am
Let's spotlight a.
I am blown away.
That's not one of the. Okay. Anyway, by the way, if you've seen Game of Thrones, this podcast will be appropriate. If you watch the Game of Thrones on VidAngel or won't watch Game of Thrones, you're gonna be offended at some point.
Lots of tits, lots of dicks.
See, I haven't
Tits
seen any
dicks.
dicks yet, but I've been prepped for that by South Park, so I'm excited to see
Man.
those floppy wieners.
I think it's season 4. Best dick shot.
Is it really that late?
Is it? Yeah, it's got to be 4 or 5.
There's a dong on the way. Ding dong, dong at the door.
And it's got a wart on it.
Okay.
The Dong of the King.
Hey.
Is that that's?
That's going to be the
Littlefinger, maybe? I don't
7th
know.
book name.
Dong of the King.
Character. We're gonna spotlight a character who I actually want each of us to name a character, and then we'll delve into one. When watching this first 4, who are you most like intrigued by their characterization by? And Tyler, I think if you want to talk about your original one or this rewatch, this is my 3rd rewatch that I'm on, and this is your 3rd, 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should introduce that real quick. So I have never watched Game of Thrones all the way, like ever. I've never watched an episode until this week, but I have read the first 2.5 books.
Back like 5 years ago, longer.
A few years
Okay.
ago, yeah, it was a while ago.
I've read all the books, although I listened to a bunch and I binged them so hard. I wish I had a greater knowledge, but I have seen the show through a full 2 times.
I have read all the books. I am currently on my 4th view through of the entire series. Granted, my first view through was when there were only 2 seasons out.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
I've been live since season 1.
So like I watched the first 2 seasons thinking in 2 days, thinking there was more.
Oh.
And I went to go buy the third one, and they're like, that's not out yet. I'm like, the fuck? And so I'm like, oh, I'll read the books and finish those. And wow, we know how that's ended up.
You're watching with your wife now. I'm like, that's one of my goals is I want a wife who wants to binge shows with me, and one of them is Thrones, because I will do this again. Yeah. Like, this is leading up to the final season, but I'm sure I'm watching it. There's going to be a prequel. It's already been announced, so.
Oh, yeah, just recently, right?
Pretty recently, they kind of have...
I mean, they detailed it.
They've done a couple castings and said, hey, it's going to take 10,000 years. Take place 10,000 years before this.
I thought they were just setting up the expectation. Listen, you know our workflow.
George
This
Martin
will take 10,000 years.
Because we're going to have to freeze his brain with Walt Disney's, and then when we can bring it back to
Isn't he writing it?
What?
Isn't he writing the show?
He's got a big... He's going to be... He's not the showrunner, but he's going to have a big hand in shaping it. But he's a... You know, I don't want to take too much of his time because I'm like, I don't think you're going to live to do 2 more books, so let's at least get Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
So anyway, Tyler, in these first 4, which character were you like, hey, I'm interested, I'm invested?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started recording. Probably Daenerys. Because
she's hot.
She's so hot.
We're not shallow. Give it.
No, but
give
really,
me the real reason.
That is like every scene that we see her in, she is like moving towards something new, and I feel like, especially with the time that I've seen so far, like the most happens with her in the shortest amount of screen time. You know what I mean? Like everything's like introduced and resolved in really great ways, and yeah, she bitch slaps Viserys with.
You see that character growth, and you believe it really quickly. That she goes from this meek girl to be like, she already feels more empowered.
Right? Yeah.
She's a good one. I don't know. I love
you heard it here
I
first, folks. Daenerys, she's a good
no, I
one.
think, yeah, that's weird because when I first started watching the show, like I said, first 2 seasons have been out. I'd seen like promotional stuff for it, and I'm like, who are these 2 blonde porn stars in this show? Like, Katie and I, as we've been watching, we're like, man, the makeup in the first like 5 episodes is really bad.
Yeah,
and
it's
like
real heavy
on her especially. It's like really porn star, and so like,
and it's weird because I don't know if when they started making this, they're like, yeah, we'll just make her real young like she is in the books, and then they're like, oh, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, she's 16, I believe.
Oh, no,
no, she's 14.
Well, everyone's significantly younger because John and Rob are both 15.
Yeah,
and she's like 13, right?
Yeah, she's 13. Yeah, in the books.
But yeah, I mean, so going into it, I was like, she was the one I was like least interested in. I'm like, she's gonna have really bad writing attached to her, I think, and like, but then I was surprised how quickly it happens because like I said, it's 4 episodes in, and she's already kind of gone from what she was in the first episode, very timid, very, introverted, bottled up kind of, to being already like becoming very aggressive.
Yeah. I will also say that Jorah Mormont's character I find more compelling on screen than I did in the book. I thought he was a lot. I didn't like him as much in the book.
I think the actor brings a lot to that character.
I also, in my mind, he was much fatter in the book, which is a weird thing. I don't know why.
Well, in the book, he's like supposed to look way different. He's supposed to be like way hairier and have dark hair.
Okay, maybe that's why I got it, but yeah.
And the other thing, Dany is so far removed from everyone else. In these first 4 episodes in Westeros, we see Winterfell, King's Landing, and the Wall for the most part, and so everything for her is so different. It is so out of, and she is in. They start off in Pentos, right? Yeah. So she's in Pentos, and then she goes off with the Khalasar, and you can. I love feeling the difference of Essos. I like that contrast.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. Who was your character, Mitchell? Do we want to talk about the first time you watched through, or something you've like picked up this time? That's
I don't even know if I remember the first time. I know like Rob is a character that intrigued me the first time around, and I thought he would be bigger right away. And if you've seen the first 4 episodes, he's not, and he's actually someone who grows a lot, but is very different book to movie. So, but Arya is definitely the one this time around that I'm like, so many little things she does. In fact, she gives us some exposition. And I'm like, oh, you didn't need to say it so. You didn't need to give me that exposition so bluntly. But she is so interesting to watch because you know exactly what she is. She's a tomboy, but the layers come so quickly, and her relationship with John and her father are really sweet, and her animosity towards Sansa, like, very relatable feelings, and a very intriguing character that she does not have the arc that Dany has, but I think you're already starting to see those layers, and you're starting to see someone who's too young to factor into a Game of Thrones grow into a really interesting person.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone, I think Arya is, like, kind of arguably the fan favorite.
Yeah.
In the community.
Which she was not initially for me.
No, for me either, I would say, until about season... Well, I mean, by season 2, I was in love with, like, every character, right? But, like, season 3 was when I really felt, like, more interested in her, and, like, definitely on, especially this past season, after what has happened the past season, which we won't go into, but, like, knowing what happens in the future with her and, like, watching it through, it's kind of like, and that's with every character, but with Arya especially, you're like...
She is a great overall arc. I will say, we are going to try and do the spoiler-free, so we're not going to give away anything past this. And because we're sitting right here, and like it's going to be hard sometimes when Tyler says something, or if we have someone else who hasn't seen the show on before, we might look at each other and might go, like, I think it's going to be really hard, but I don't want to infer. I think it's hard being in a world where it's so big in the culture to not know some of the people who are still alive or dead or this or that, but I think as best we can, like, we're going to not say anything about them. So we'll try and speak in the context of these episodes and what we've seen so far. I will say that, so if you are here and you don't want to be spoiled, we are not going to spoil you, and we also have editing power, so if we say something like that we think is too giving away, there's some things that are inferred or just general about the show that I don't think will be problems, we will edit that out.
Yeah. I think my first time through watching the series, Tyrion was the one that grabbed me pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if this is true, because I haven't delved a whole lot into George R. R. Martin's personal life, because that's scary. But I mean, like,
he lives in New Mexico.
While watching it, I kind of got the vibe that that's the character he put the most of himself into. And I don't know, I just was really interested by that character, was because right off the bat, for me, he personifies what the show's about, of like, there are no real good guys, bad guys. He like does support his family full well knowing that they're all pieces of shit, but also like has a lot of good morally good qualities to him as he goes forward.
Well, also the idea that the Game of Thrones is amoral, like I think like Tyrion's character, especially in these like first few episodes, personifies the idea that it is a game. You know what I mean? It's you can't let your emotions come into it. Though your emotions are for something else. Yeah. Like this, when you're politically maneuvering, all those things, like there's no room for that emotion. And he is like an interest. I think that like all the conversations he has are so interesting, and like he's also the person that when he notices something, he's a fun character to watch, because you like when sometimes characters will notice things in a show and then they'll be like, well, it's probably nothing, and you're like, it is something, because we just saw like the scene before. But he's the character that like always, at least in these first few episodes, when he notices something that you already know, he immediately knows why it's important and is kind of up with where you're at almost. You know what I mean? Like it's
like you said, all of his conversations are so good. He is, for all of Game of Thrones and the excitement that comes with a fantasy show, especially in these beginning parts, there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of people in rooms talking, and some of that is very important and very well written. And there are some hokey moments and trouble, but his scenes are so well done. And episode 4 is called Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. Like he epitomizes that. Him and Jon Snow have conversations, a bastard and a broken thing of sorts, because he is very unwanted for being a dwarf. And so I think, he personifies that. He is definitely a fan favorite who he can be an audience avatar at times, but at times he just straddles these worlds and you don't know how to feel about him, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I think that this time, though, watching it, well, actually the past like 2 times watching it through, a character who has become probably, when people ask me who my favorite character is, it's always hard to say, but I go with this one because he intrigues me so much, is Varys.
Ah, yes.
Varys is just one of my favorite characters.
And he's barely in these first 4.
No, he's not in it. I mean, even compared to other characters throughout the whole series, he's not like a huge staple in it, but like his conversations with everyone, and just like the fact that his whole motive is so like
different from anyone else.
Yeah, and you like don't get what it is. Even at this point, after seeing all of it, you still kind of are like unsure fully, you know? And I don't know, his conversations, especially with like Littlefinger and later on Tyrion, is like just incredible.
The show is full of really minor characters that can become bigger or can't, but really intriguing and contribute more than you might think, or might factor into the bigger story more than you might think, just as far as like the political agenda goes. Let's do moment. What moment of these first 4 episodes stood out to you, whether it be like fun, cool, meaningful, factoring into the actual game? I don't know who to start this one, but
I can start.
Okay, yeah, one second.
I think mine is actually probably the moment at the end of the 4th episode where Catelyn, is that how you say her name?
Yeah,
is that how everyone
Catelyn,
says that? I was trying to notice that. Anyways, she's on her way back from King's Landing, where she found out that blade was lost to Tyrion. And Tyrion comes into the inn that she is, you know, I mean, she's still undercover at this point. And then he's kind of hinted that he knows that she's not at Winterfell when he gets back there from the wall and all this stuff. But that scene where she like stands up and she's just like talking to everyone and like being like, "Oh, my dad thinks you're really cool," and you're really cool, and like just that moment of like, it's maybe the first moment that we see Tyrion a little bit behind the 8 ball, like, he's kind of in this situation and he's realizing as it's happening what is going to happen. Not fully, like he still doesn't understand her entire motivation, but the idea that she then has everyone take him into custody kind of in that moment. That's just such a cool moment to me because it's a culmination. It's pulling together so many of those threads that you've seen and into a moment that I think feels distinctly Game of Thrones, where everything is political and like it's just a really great moment of seeing a character use the politics to get what they want in an interesting way. So that for me was just like a really cool moment. And I really like Catelyn Stark too. I think that actress is really incredibly well cast. And yeah, I think she's a great like counterpoint. Her and Sean Bean serve as such a great counterpoint to like all the King's Landing people. I just think they're awesome. They're real good.
They do.
I think that point. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that point is one of the first in the show where, like that's where the episode ends, and it's like, but you know right off the bat, like this is gonna have huge ramifications. Like this is a big deal,
right?
That like it almost feels like the first. What's the best word? It's not first blood because the Lannisters can't do that, but it kind of feels like the first response back.
Right, yeah.
But also...
It's the confirmation that we have a conflict here.
Yeah, but you also like panic because you're like, nobody knows about this. Catelyn's the only one who's like doing this. Ned doesn't know. Like, you're just like, oh, what do you... Yeah.
Well, and you also don't know. Like, you don't have any... Like, you still don't know all of the... like the full backstory of what happened with that knife or whatever, you know what I mean? Like as a detective watching this show, like you don't have the pieces to determinatively say who is all involved, you know. So yeah, it is interesting.
My favorite moment is I'm trying to watch people I know I don't like a little bit better, a little bit differently. Like the whole section with Joffrey being a jerk, I don't even like watching. Where he is being a bully and then eventually gets the dog killed. Like, so it's not my top moment, but like, I really am trying to look at because family is this huge thing with the Lannisters and legacy and all this, and so I like that their family breakfast the at the beginning of episode 2, when they're talking about how Bran is hurt and might die. Etc. And you can see the concern in Jaime and Cersei's faces because they know that they did it, and just the reaction of everyone around them. And Harrow, there's so much unsaid between them, and so much concern and frustration, and all of their scenes alone feel so devious. But we were kind of making incest jokes before, and we will continue to. But there is an absolute authenticity to their relationship where they are terrible, power-hungry people, but they also care about each other, and So it's interesting to see when he pushes Bran out the window. He says, "Oh, the things I do for love."
Yeah.
And then he, just their breakfast that next morning. It's such a down moment compared to all these extravagant things that happen in Game of Thrones. But so much gets unsaid of their concern, of their deviousness.
Well, and you also, that is another scene where you see Tyrion understanding, like, you already know that he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
And he very clearly knows that there's something else going on. But he's, like, also joking with the kids during that whole scene. And, like, it's such an interesting dynamic in that scene. It's really cool.
I mean, they set him up as a drunk, but it's pretty quickly dispelled that, like, this dude's...
Yeah.
He's...
Well, we all know that drunks are the smartest.
Well... We get introduced to him in a whorehouse where he's with one whore, and then Jamie brings in like 5 more whores, and he's just like, who cares? He's living it up as a person born from privilege who gets treated like crap. He's in it. He's a very interesting dichotomy of a human being.
Yeah.
And I think that also reflects kind of what we were talking about earlier about his character of in that moment where he is joking, but he is very aware of the things that his siblings are doing, and is able to put the pieces very together that, like, Bran saw them going at it, and
doggy style,
and they just pushed this boy out the window right immediately after slapping Joffrey, telling him to go
a fun moment.
Apologize.
Oh yeah, that is a fun moment. I kind of forgot
to go
about
give
that,
his sympathies for Bran being injured. So it's like,
and then he pees off the wall. That's a great moment too, because that's something I would do.
I honestly, when I saw that shot, I was like, I would never do that because I would fall.
I'd be scared. I'm pretty scared of heights.
I would just envision like my pee is a rope that then got stuck on a tree, and then that would like force me off the edge, and it would all be psychological.
Wow,
that's what I thought. I thought that. Anyways.
No, I think I felt that same thing. I was like, I wouldn't stand that close to I'd be the worst Night's Watchman. I'd be Sam, just cowering in the back.
Gosh.
I don't know if my favorite... Okay, I'm trying to think if it's happened yet. There's a conversation between... Are they at King's... They're at King's Landing now, right?
Yeah.
There's a conversation between Cersei and Robert where it's just them. Has that happened
It is
yet?
not.
I don't think so.
Okay, then I'm not going to say that one.
We can skip that one.
I think... It's hard to say. I remember my first time viewing it, and this is going to bring up a whole other thing about that. Katie and I had this argument quite a lot when we watched Game of Thrones, so I'll probably have to get into that. But the moment in episode 2, I believe it is, where Joffrey has just been a dick, and they just find Arya, and Ned comes storming in. He's like, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" And like they're like, "Yeah, well, you're not the king." And anyway, they get that whole thing resolved, and as they're leaving, Cersei's like, "What about the wolf?"
Yeah.
And then immediately she my first view through cemented herself as, this is the character I hate the most. I want this bitch dead.
Yeah.
Like, and Katie, my wife, she's always like, Joffrey's the worst character. He's the worst human being in the show. I'm like, I would argue that Joffrey is mentally ill. He's not fully accountable because something is severely wrong with his brain chemistry.
I mean, he is arguably the worst time of human existence, which is like prepubescence.
Yeah.
Like he's at the worst stage of humanity, and he's also being raised by some of the worst humans.
Yeah. And so like I'm like, there's that. Cersei is just pure evil. She's fully accountable, and she is just the worst. I hate her more than anyone in the show, and I want her dead.
She's a very power-hungry person who is also... The way that she goes about treating those around her and maintaining her power is she does unnecessary things. One thing that's interesting is I think of Game of Thrones as such a tumultuous thing, but like in these first few episodes, like things are in harmony, like things are working. Like, of course, the inciting incident that sparks a lot of different things has already happened, but in general, like there's peace in the kingdom. These families don't like each other, but like they're in their roles and they have this awkward bridge, and it's fascinating, that piece, and how she disturbs that without needing to. And like I look at Robert Baratheon as living his best life. Like the dude is just terrible king, but he's having a great time.
That is one of my favorite casting choices. Also,
Oh, yeah.
like Mark Addy is a perfect choice for him.
But it just makes like her her attitude and frustration with her husband is to some degree warranted, but the way she goes about it is just disgusting. And so I've like, this time I'm kind of more enjoying Robert for what he is, but the way that she ended up with him and the way that dynamic works that makes her such a poison, it's really interesting. And the way she handles it, of course, is at times genius and at times just destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge theme throughout the show for her is like the battle between her getting her way versus loving her children, doing anything for them. And that shows mostly just shows with Joffrey in the first few seasons,
right?
And particularly in the first couple, as well as her. Yeah, I won't get into that actually.
With all Lannisters, there's just so much hate and disgust, but there is also this feeling of obligation, and you do hit points where, with certain people that you hate, you don't root for them, but they become a lot more intriguing and less spiteful, and it's an easy roller coaster of pity to have. And so and then characters do change. And so it's interesting to see your initial reactions to people. But that family in particular, like they have something so wrong with them, but they mean a lot. And it's interesting to see their arcs.
Yeah. I will say I definitely was not interested in hearing Jaime Lannister talking about killing the king one more time. I was like, literally every scene I've seen of him for the last 4 times is someone coming in and being like, oh, the king killer, oh. And he's like, when I killed the king, like, oh my gosh. I was like, I don't know if like he's narcissistic or if he's just the celebrity and that's all anyone wants to talk to him about. Either way, I'm done.
Can I say that through like the book, it's even worse. Like I just feel like it's mentioned all the time throughout time with him.
Yeah.
The theme. What is the theme? What is the category? The theme. I'm not sure.
I don't know. What's the thematic?
Are we talking about?
I think that the thread that is tying everything together right now is family.
Yeah.
And loyalty. Like especially the first 2 episodes, that's very clearly established. But it's interesting because and of course like I think every family represents that differently. Because the Starks I think are very loyal to each other, but also they're loyal to the law. They're loyal to like
sense of honor.
The way things are, tradition and like all of that. The Lannisters are extremely loyal to each other, and that's it,
Yeah.
And then Viserys and Daenerys. They're a broken family.
She's incredibly loyal to him.
Yes.
And
but she also I think it's interesting because I think a lot of that loyalty, it isn't the loyalty you find in the Starks.
Yes, exactly.
It's the loyalty of he is the only person I have in this world.
He is loyal to a name. Like he feels so entitled and clearly is not prepared to ever actually be a king, but he feels like that's his blood right, which is, that's a thing throughout storytelling is what are you born to compared to self-achieving? Like, it's the American dream versus being born a Kennedy. And so to see
You heard it here first, the Targaryens are the
Kennedys. But just to see like how much their family name matters to them, even though it's just those two. I think family too relevant because, of course, as any story begins, there's inciting incidents for each character and changes, and we see how they adjust to them. And I think right now, nobody's looking out for just themselves. They are all considering other people because these familial bonds are so important. So through this change and through people figuring out what's the best move for me, they are looking to their family to help them or what is best for their family as well as themselves.
Yeah.
I think like all those contrast each other very nicely, and even including John's situation at the Wall, where he is kind of forming a new family in his own way and trying to learn what that loyalty means in that scenario with those people who that is actually one of my favorite moments of the beginning of those first few episodes is Tyrion helping Jon realize what the Night's Watch actually is, and him getting there, and him just being like this kind of a brat, but also a brat who you can understand where that comes from because of his scenario.
Yeah.
Well, and his only link to family up there is his uncle Benjen, who is immediately going out on arranging, and Jon thinks, well, I should go on that, and he puts him in his place and says that's not how this works. And I think Jon realizes. I don't know how. I'm curious how much Jon has romanticized being part of the Night's Watch. He's mostly just been hated by Cat. He loves his siblings in his life, but he doesn't see a future as a bastard being someone of significance where he can excel in the relationships and the ways that he wants to in the world. So he flees. But the Night's Watch, I don't have any scholarly background, but they used to have along the wall a ton of castles from end to end of Westeros, thousands of men. They were there to stop the wildlings, any other dangers, and it used to be this massive and honorable force. And while they always taken like criminals could take the black, or like someone who just felt like they didn't belong could take the black, these guys are not supposed to father children or get married. Whores in Molestown are fair game as long as it's doggy style. But there is like this honor to it.
There's a placard in every room that says that exact thing.
Their oath is dope. Like, it's a great idea, but right now it's like 4 castles are manned. They're not really a force as much as like they're monitoring things and trying to. It's mostly criminals.
Well, and Master Aemon says that to. I think it's when he's talking to Tyrion. He's like, "We're a bunch of old men and kids up here."
Yeah,
that's hi.
Yeah,
like that's it. That's all they have. And
people
like,
die, and of course the Wall and Beyond that like becomes more of it. But that I was so bored with that stuff in the beginning, and now I'm much more interested in like that family stuff. I got the schoolboy like, oh, they don't like you because you're a lord's son. Now he kind of makes friends, but it's a lot more intriguing to read about, or to watch this time around. I'm much more into what's going on at the Wall, but it is still like people in rooms talking. It's pretty boring.
Yeah.
And Sam is still a fat piece of shit.
Okay, let's have this conversation. I see this a lot online of there's a division. There's people who absolutely hate Sam, and there's people who absolutely love Sam.
I just don't want to get into Sam's future.
I don't feel like
but
there's
like,
middle ground at all.
This is the first time where Jon's protection of him really, I was like, I think you went too far. And like, it's great to know that Sam is a good person, so we root for him as a good person. But there's also a point to where it's like, we clearly like Jon's important, and we're like, why are you?
Is he a liability? Is that where?
I don't know, liability. Yeah, as much as like, why are you wasting your energy on like ticking everyone off for this guy? Like, because you know he's not a bad person. His dad was going to kill him if he didn't come. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that felt a little much to me. Just with like Jon's character, like he does have that moment with Tyrion where like Tyrion reveals himself to be maybe one of the best teachers in Westeros, because he just kind of like casually drops like their backstory and where they're from, you know. Yeah. And it does feel like a little bit too much of a swing the other way. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like, I don't necessarily connect with Jon in any way yet, just because I don't like, I understand where he's coming from and like kind of the base of that character. But yeah, some of the stuff that he's done since he's been at the Watch, I don't know. And Sam is fine. I think that his backstory is like really sad. But also it's like, just try.
Yeah.
like that's the thing is I think that where we're at now, like he's still not trying, you know, and that's one thing for me is like, I need a character to try for me to like,
and I feel like in the book he does, and I buy their bond a little bit more, and I think we talked about how we buy the 4-episode arc of Daenerys growing. I don't know if I buy their friendship forming that quickly to where Jon's willing to stick his neck out for him when these guys just hated him 1 episode before, and they've kind of come around as he's tried to help them learn to fight better. But I don't have any dislike. I think it just, the way it came off to me, as intrigued as I was by this new world that Jon is in, and again, you're right, it's not all that interesting.
Well,
yet.
And honestly, talking about it now, I also am thinking though, like going back to that theme of family, like Jon, I desperately wants a family. You know what I mean?
And he wants someone to protect.
Yeah,
I think that makes sense.
And I think that shows with like his relationship with Arya, his relationship with Bran, like he kind of is that like father figure. Not that they don't have a father figure in Ned, but he like I think that he wants to
It's
fill
a
that
special
role,
relationship, yeah.
and so I wonder if that's part of it too.
And Sam could literally eat Bran and Arya, so it works.
Yeah, 2 for 1.
Cool. We'll get to final thoughts on
Condenses his father.
the actual episodes in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about a little bit from an outside perspective of the show and of the filmmaking. Obviously, Game of Thrones has won a bunch of Emmys. It's thought of as like beautiful and cool, and there have definitely been some amazing direct sequences and things. But in these first few, we talked about some bad makeup. Like there are some sequences that are not great. There's some sets that change after this, and that's interesting to me. This was expensive, but not as insanely expensive as you'd think. This first book was written in 91 and it didn't come out until 2010. And like HBO was excited, but I think it's important to remember this was not a phenomenon right away. It was in the zeitgeist. Like people were thinking about it. People were all talking about it, but I don't want it until like season 3. It wasn't like casual people were like, yes, I want this thing that is on premium cable, tits and dragons. And it's slow and dramatic at times. Like it hadn't captured this element of like, everybody needs to watch this even if they would never normally be into fantasy. And I think it reached that. It's one of the few things I think that you can almost say is like monoculture. It's something everybody has some sort of tangential interest or knowledge in. But as far as filmmaking goes, like it must be really well done because you can't do medieval, you can't do fantasy really well unless you have a lot of money. So the fact that they did it without the money that Peter Jackson had, say, in 2001 when he made Lord of the Rings is pretty interesting to me. Tyler, what did you think of it from like not that you're necessarily watching the cinematography and all the production elements, but what did you think of the filmmaking when you approach this thing that is supposed to be like the gold standard of television?
I mean, I think that there's some interesting, cool stuff. Like the opening sequence I did not expect because the opening sequence of the show is essentially setting up for a horror movie. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, it
the
very
whole
much
stuff
felt that way.
of like him encountering that guy encountering the walkers or whatever they are. Like that was really interesting. I think the thing I like about it is how minimal it is. I mean, it's which is a hilarious thing to say about Game of Thrones that it's minimal in any way.
Yeah.
But it's I guess the better word is subtle. Like it's not like super gaudy. Like even the stuff in King's Landing, like you still get the idea that even though people are living comfortably, it's a medieval setting. It's a Dark Ages setting. Yeah. And especially in Game of Thrones where magic isn't like pervasive throughout the world in any way. Like it very much is that Middle Ages.
There's nothing fantasy in these first 4 episodes, right? Nothing magical.
I mean, the dragons are mentioned.
Yeah.
And that stuff. But yeah, I think that I think that especially like, I think the thing that stood out to me is the lighting in this show, just because
lighting is hard.
It's so
That's
hard.
what you learned.
Lighting is so hard. No, but like everything just feels very real. It feels pretty raw. The only time that you can kind of notice things like when it does the wide shot of King's Landing and you're like, that's a computer.
Yeah, there's a wide shot of Winterfell that I feel that way about too.
I feel like all the wide shots of Winterfell in that first season are so far back because they knew like we can't make this look real. It's like it's just this tiny thing in the distance.
Right.
I've always had issues with the like geography of Winterfell and the different like this main courtyard that they spend some time in and how it gets framed and yet how it looks from the outside. It's very odd to me, but there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, but that's what I think. I think this show, I think they know what's important, and they have so many great actors. It's like, put your actors in the frame and let them do the work. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like
that's something that really blew me away with the show because like I haven't watched before this. I hadn't watched anything on HBO. I don't think, and I know that's more than normal because you got a higher budget for HBO. But, like, the casting in this show, especially after reading the books as well, is, like, you guys nailed it. Yeah. Like, especially for, like, getting unknowns that fit that. Like, I don't think Kit Harington has an acting career in anything else besides being Jon Snow. Like, but he is, in my mind, at least from what I read in the book, like, he fits that character very well. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like the guy I can never remember his name or pronounce it. The guy who plays Jamie. It's like same thing with him. It's like I don't know.
Nicola Castor-Waldo.
Yeah,
I don't know if
that.
he's got a future in anything else. And like even in the first season, his acting isn't as good as it gets later.
Yeah, he does get better.
Later, it gets really good, and you're like, man, no one else can.
I think also he's probably given less at the beginning. Like that's a harder character.
Yeah, he's
to introduce immediately.
like, I
That's
think
why you have
Lena,
him tell the story of him killing the king 4 times, so everyone knows it's interesting.
Lena Headey is really good right from the start, and they are both pure asshole before you learn a little bit more about them. You know about casting what ifs just a little bit. The one Peter Dinklage was the only one that was like, we know that George R. R. Martin wanted him. They knew that was going to happen,
And he's incredible.
Yeah.
He's great.
and these are ones that are like, I know a couple of them are for sure true. These aren't just casting rumors. Is it? How do you pronounce the lead actress in X-Files name?
Gillian?
Is it Gillian or Jillian?
I think it's Jillian.
I didn't want to have this conversation.
Wait, and
Gillian
oh,
Anderson?
Gillian Anderson.
Okay,
yeah,
it's Gillian.
yeah.
She was
Gillian
going to be
Anderson.
Cersei. They actually shot the pilot with a different Daenerys. And then there was definitely someone else cast as Catelyn Stark, who I think turned out fantastic. And then some of these are for later seasons, so I don't really want to get into them. But that's just a couple of things that, like you said, they nailed it. Not that maybe Gillian Anderson would have been fine. I know she was in American Gods, and people thought she was pretty decent. But it's interesting that they felt they needed to reshoot Daenerys, and she is a big thing. She's the only one in Essos, and she is kind of a lone wolf. Pardon the Stark reference. She's doing her own thing out there, but they had to really nail that one. And I wonder if that original pilot was bad. I know they did a lot of reshoots, period. And I didn't see any clear weaknesses in the pilot compared to episode 2, but I wonder why that specific thing they felt like they had to redo and get right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, like, we haven't talked a lot about Ned. Like, man,
What do you say?
like,
He's
like,
incredible.
Yeah,
is so
just
good.
Sean Bean is so good, and like when I first saw that he was like casting this thing like that promotional material again, I was like, that's weird, Boromir. You know,
That's what you
that,
think
like-
of him as Boromir. Like, he does such
Yeah.
both very similar in some ways and complete opposites in other ways, and he does great at both.
Honestly, in my heart, Ned Stark goes to sleep as a reckless youth, has a dream that he's Boromir, and learns how to love, and then wakes up as an honorable man.
That's why Boromir dies an honorable death.
Yes.
Spoilers for the end of Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
we said no spoilers, damn it.
Even though those were written in the 40s and the movie came out in 2001.
We'll also be telling you spoilers for Sopranos, Breaking Bad, but we won't spoil Thrones.
This is really just a Game of Thrones podcast. We're going to throw in random spoilers for other shows.
Something that the show's on a whole nother level of quality than a lot of the other stuff I have watched on TV, but something that like I almost like gagged this time was there's the obligatory sex in HBO
Yeah.
shows. Like, it's almost like they didn't try with the dialogue in those scenes. There's one where Viserys is taking a bath with that slave girl, which is the worst porno shit I have ever heard in my life. I turned to Katie, I was like, whoever wrote this scene needs to be taken in the back alley and just shot,
It's
because
really bad.
it was horrible.
But also,
And it's supposed to tell you something about him, and it does kind of get that point across, but it sounds so bad.
I think Viserys' idea of great sex is a shitty porno.
Probably.
Of him
He's
just
that
getting
kind of
angry at
guy,
people.
yeah.
But I will say there are sex scenes in Game of Thrones that come out a little bit more naturally and fine, and there are some that feel more like this is HBO. And in the beginning, I think they're much more HBO-y.
No, I agree.
I mean, I will say though, the Daenerys stuff is all very like narratively motivated.
It is.
Like
And
that is
that's very important.
And it's brutal,
yeah.
but I think it doesn't
It's really
come off
gross
as
to watch.
gratuitous.
The
Yeah.
first couple episodes of Daenerys are very gross and hard to watch. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, there's more gross and hard to watch stuff. Not sexual, just overall. But yeah, I can only think of a few things that I think are especially gratuitous that really were like, well, that was just a waste of time. But there's definitely some porny stuff that it's not necessarily that the sex is porny. It's that the way they try and make it seem story is corny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No,
porny.
and I agree with you. There's ones that work and there's ones that don't.
Yeah.
And the ones that work come more frequently as the show goes on.
I will say when her handmaiden, who was previously in a whorehouse, is like teaching her how to get on top and not do doggy style, like I think that's a scene that is like,
And that's how you make men happy.
yeah, it's an erotic scene. Like it's definitely like very very persuasively like this is going to turn, but it worked, and you see that pays off when her relationship with the call changes a little bit when she actually utilizes it.
Yeah.
Although I mean, but yeah, it's still got some bad lines and some porny moments.
Definitely.
Well, we ended on
Bad lines and porny moments. Join us next week to see what else happens on Game of Thrones.
Do you guys remember any quotes from the first few?
I probably
You took
wrote
copious
a couple
notes.
down.
Do you need to go through some more notes? I don't want that to be in vain.
No, it helps me to like internalize it because then
Yeah.
I didn't have to be looking at it. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I just wrote down like the Stark family crest line, which is should be he who passes the sentence should swing the sword. That's like the Starks.
I do like
in
that.
a nutshell. All of the I don't know why I wrote this down, but all the Dothraki women saying "it is known" over and over. I was like, oh, go
He's
away.
gone.
Dude, my favorite is like, and obviously like, casting's weird, but the amount of white Dothraki is perplexing.
Yeah, they like try and make them
Yeah.
seem less than white.
It's like, and Dothraki are a melting pot.
Yeah.
Well, they do, inbreed with whatever slaves and people they take. So maybe.
Yeah.
I really like. I think Littlefinger, whose accent actually changes a little bit at times.
Oh, yeah, he speaks way differently in the first season.
He
than the others.
he tells a story about how the Hound and the Mountain, about how the Mountain pushed his little brother's face in the Fireland, and I think that creepy, haunting feeling. I think he does a good job delivering that. So I think that whole story was good, and he gets a handful of monologues that he kills.
He's honestly one of my favorite actors in the show. He's so good. I've seen him in a handful of other things too. He's the dad in Sing Street, which is like a really small role, but he's really
Sing
great
Street.
in that movie. So
He's
yeah,
like
I
the
him a lot.
douche manager in Bohemian Rhapsody, which fits him, and
Oh yeah, that's right.
he also plays a douche in the Maze Runner series. But yeah, he's an interesting cat.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just found another line that I wrote down, which is one of Tyrion's lines. It's one of my favorites. That's if you're going to be a cripple, it's better to be a rich cripple.
Yeah.
It's just a good. That's
He's
that's
got
a
a lot
good
of good
Tyrion
lines.
line. Yeah,
Yeah, he always has a gem.
it's good wisdom from Tyrion Lannister.
So, Tyler, who do you think is winning the Game of Thrones? Or whose actions in this episode do you think would make you think, okay, that person can win this politically?
I mean, I think it's hard to say anyone but Cersei,
Mm.
just because she's so cutthroat.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest thing is like she's pushed so far ahead of everyone else. That,
She seems like she's been like doing it the longest.
Yeah.
And like
yeah,
everyone else is just kind of
and every conversation she has that isn't with Jamie, there's all the language is so charged.
Yeah.
Like her conversation with
Ned?
Ned. Yeah.
Oh, that
exactly.
one, that's
exactly what
a
I was
really
thinking
good,
of.
intense exchange.
Yeah, and you just feel like I don't know, you just feel all of her bad intent. And that's the thing is like I think she as a character, everyone knows who
Yeah.
she is, but they don't know what she's gonna do. You know what I mean? That's like so I would say her. And probably Daenerys, because Daenerys is winning wherever she's at.
yeah.
Not directly in relation to the actual throne at this point, but she has become Khaleesi.
She's already, and like I said, I mean, her focus is different, her movement are different, but she's definitely won as far as going from nothing to, because the whole idea of her and her brothers are getting this army of Dothraki, man, woo, that blanked, of Dothraki, to somehow help them to get power again in Westeros, to get their throne back, and like Viserys thinks he's going to do that, and you so quickly see that she is much more of a possible impact person and a strong person than he is. So she does win in that way. Yeah. Any other final observations, thoughts on episodes 1 through 4 of Game of Thrones season 1?
Sansa sucks. I hate her.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, she's playing a stereotype to the bone, and she has zero room for depth right now. And you just want to punch her in her. I was kind of rooting for her and Joffrey. I was like, those little douches deserve each other.
I did write down. Let me see if I'm finding the exact thing. I did write down at some point if vampire and werewolf fiction exists in Westeros, Sansa loves it.
You know how 50
she
Shades
is angst personified at this point. And it's
50
the
Shades
worst.
came from Twilight
Yeah.
fan fiction. If we get another disastrous, terrible bondage
Yeah.
movie, it may very well come from Sansa and Joffrey. Someone who only read like these first or only watched these first 4 episodes and was like, those two, this is actually a romantic show about those two ending up together. Let's write a wolf and he's a stag, a wolf and a stag sex show. And then we'll do a bestiality movie called 50 Shades of Fur. I don't know where that came
You
from.
thought about this way too much.
No, that was all on this.
Sounds like you got the pilot episode written.
Well, you can find me on fanfiction.net under Pirate Wolf 22.
That's exclusively Harry Potter fiction, though, right?
It's not, but there is like a ton.
Yeah, Harry Potter erotica, right?
There is Harry Potter erotica. That's a real thing.
I think that brings up a whole nother relationship thing that I find annoying about the fan base of Game of Thrones is the love they have for Khal Drogo. And
There's a lot of. I mean,
it's a
I'm
Beauty
not
and the
female.
Beast type of thing.
I mean, I can
yeah, is there
see
some
it.
Stockholm syndrome?
I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, they think he's hot. Yeah, but at the same
He's
time,
got a great body.
It is like one of those very like. I mean, most of what we see of Khal Drogo at this point is just him boning down.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, like
Seems good at it.
he's a horrible person, and he has done and continues to do horrible things. Just because he grows attached to someone doesn't make him.
His entire culture
a-
is horrible.
Yeah, and even like, we won't get into like what happens in the rest of the season, but I mean, like, there really is nothing in this season that could possibly redeem, nor do they try and say it does, because he continues to mention things like we're gonna rape their women and things like that. Like,
Yeah, Dany is very anti-slave, anti-like rape, and that comes out in a lot of ways. She just wants people to be treated with respect. And I'm like, you married into the wrong family.
yeah, like,
It's like,
and I don't know. I'm just gonna put my voice out there that Khal Drogo is a shitty person, and he is not to be idolized. Think with your brains, not your vages.
whoa. Hey, just mansplaining
okay.
the shit out of your sexuality. Go see Aquaman.
No.
No.
Why? Why
I'm
would
gonna
you use
see-
your
are you-
voice
are
in
you gonna
that
see
way?
it?
I don't know.
I think it's going to be a bad good movie, and he's going to be the same person he plays in
I
it.
think it's gonna be bad.
Do you remember when the three of us actually did a podcast about a movie called The Bad Batch, where he
Yes.
plays Miami Man,
Oh my god.
and he eats humans and is just this disgusting, weird, barbaric thing. That's what the dude does.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted one more comment on quality. Just like there are other shows in medieval times right now that are big, like Vikings. There's one called like Kingdoms or something on Netflix. Outlander. Game of Thrones really does better than anyone else, and those like are all considered to be well made. Like, and it just keeps getting better. I'm actually interested to observe how those things continue to get better.
Yeah, I'm excited for to watch season 6 again.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
have
you
a-
were trying to figure out what the last season
no.
was. And
We'll definitely talk
Oh.
about season rankings at some point.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we need to, because there's a dud one.
I disagree strongly, and I know what you're talking about. Wait, show me under the table. Show me under the table.
I think it's that one. It might be.
I actually agree with you more. I thought you were going to say this one, and I disagree with that. I think people are very wrong about that. I think this makes this worth having. I'm talking about love makes sex worth having, Tyler.
oh,
Anyway,
I guess I'm on board with that. I don't know.
interesting. Sorry. Hey, that was our first episode of our Game of Thrones podcast, and we're probably going to record a new ending when we come up with a name. We didn't introduce ourselves.